There are few episodes of animated television that announce themselves as confidently as On Leather Wings, the very first episode produced for Batman the Animated Series. Though The Cat in the Claw Part 1 would air first, frankly that's meaningless in the age of Blu-ray box sets and streaming platforms, On Leather Wings was the first episode to be made, and is widely listed as the first episode, except for on Max in the USA, but that is an entirely separate matter. As the pilot episode of sorts, On Leather Wings defined what the series was going to be. An atmospheric, cinematic and sophisticated take on Batman unlike anything that had come before. It's probably hard to imagine now, but in the dark days of the 1980s, most American cartoons were essentially extended toy commercials churned out as quickly as possible. While earlier superhero cartoons like the Super Friends or the New Adventures of Batman have their place, they didn't really reflect the Batman of the comic books. The same could also be said of Tim Burton's blockbuster Batman movie, which, while still very good, was quite different to the comic book Batman. But following Warner Bros. Negotiating an exclusive deal with director Steven Spielberg, which contained a clause that Warner Bros. Animation should prioritise their animation department, Warner Animation went through something of a renaissance, producing seminal hits like Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs, and of course BTAS. Because of Spielberg and Warner Bros.' desire to keep him happy, the animation department was essentially given creative carte blanche, which meant that they could finally make a show that they could be immensely proud of. Now, they weren't without their obstacles. TV standards and practices of the time, basically the TV censors, were quite strict. One of the earliest videos that I made on this channel was about how these restrictions actually helped BTAS in some cases, so check that out if you haven't seen it already. I've linked to it in the info button and this video's description. But given the huge blockbuster success of Tim Burton's first Batman film, the expectation came to be that any Batman property going forward should be dark with more mature themes. But that doesn't mean that the team had a smooth ride. They were pushing boundaries and shaking up the way that cartoons were made, which ruffled some executives' feathers. But in my view, it was worth the struggle. In just 22 minutes, On Leather Wings perfectly set the tone, introduced the world, and showcased a level of animation and storytelling that made it clear that this was not just another Saturday morning cartoon. And yes, I know it initially aired on weekdays in the US, but in the UK it was on every Saturday. The episode opens with a police blimp, already a perfect visual shorthand for this version of Gotham City. A place equal parts noir and art deco, old-fashioned yet timeless. The city is an oppressive sprawl of towering buildings and deep shadows, painting in the now iconic dark deco style. And that's another thing to remember. This art style didn't technically exist before this show. It literally coined a whole new subset of art. Granted, there's a lot of influence from German Expressionism. Just look at Man-Bat's debut, where we see his monstrous shadow cast on the side of buildings, or his attack on the security guard before vanishing into the night. It's a jaw-dropping way to open the series, not with a cackling supervillain or a heroic Batman moment, but a mystery drenched in horror. It's immediately apparent that this Gotham is a place of danger and unease, where creatures lurk in the darkness and the police don't quite know what they're up against. And speaking of the police, the dynamic between Detective Harvey Bullock and Commissioner Gordon is a subtle but effective bit of world building. Bullock is brash, hot-headed, and completely unwilling to give Batman the benefit of the doubt. Gordon, on the other hand, is far more measured, a man who knows that Batman isn't the problem. Their debate over whether or not Batman is responsible for the string of attacks is a clever way to frame the story, showing the precarious position Batman holds in the city. He's not a beloved hero, with a bright red phone connecting him directly to the GCPD. He's a figure of suspicion, working in the shadows to do what the police can't or won't, which is a far cry from Adam West's Batman, that's for sure. What makes On Leather Wings such an effective pilot is how well it balances the detective and action sides of Batman. It's not just a superhero story, it's a crime thriller, a mystery that Batman has to solve. And the viewers are just as much in the dark about it, forgive the pun, as Batman is. We're introduced to our first suspect for the Man-Bat, Dr. March, a bat expert at Gotham Zoo and recipient of funding from Bruce Wayne, which was a nice touch. March is abrasive and dismissive. As Bruce Wayne, Batman takes a recording of the Man-Bat's screech and asks him to identify the species of bat responsible. March later informs him that it's a mixture of starlings and brown bats, likely fighting over territory, and that he should put it out of his mind. An obvious lie. We're also introduced to his daughter, Dr. Francine Langstrom, and her affable husband, Dr. Kirk Langstrom. who are more than happy to help their billionaire benefactor with his alleged bat-infested chimney. March clearly thinks very little of Bruce Wayne and underestimates his intelligence, which is another innovation of the series. Kevin Conroy plays Bruce Wayne and Batman as two different people with distinct voices. Batman is the real person, while the more light and airheady Bruce Wayne is the facade. Across the board, the entire voice cast is phenomenal. You won't find a single cartoony performance in the bunch. That's not to say that cartoony voices are bad, they have their place, but they don't really belong in this show. Voice director Andrea Romano insisted on hiring actors whose voices had character, rather than actors that could put on character voices. The key thing is that they all sounded like real people. She also brought the entire cast together to record their dialogue, stating that a key part of acting is reacting to the performance of the other actors. Traditionally, actors recorded their lines in isolation for animation, and then the performances were edited together as if they were interacting with each other. That's probably an easier way of accommodating the actors' schedules, but the difference in performances is notable. Casting actors like René Auberjonois as Dr. March, Mark Singer as Kirk Langstrom and the Man-Bat, Bobby Costanzo as Harvey Bullock, all with distinct voices. And there isn't a weak performance in the entire group. Compare this to other cartoons of the era, DuckTales, Gummy Bears, He-Man. The difference is just night and day. Likewise, the animation itself is breathtaking, setting a new standard for superhero cartoons. The episode is dripping with atmosphere, moody lighting, skirting shadows, and a filmic quality rarely seen in animation at the time. The decision to paint backgrounds on black paper rather than white gives Gotham its signature darkness, making every scene feel drenched in shadow. This was not the practice of the time. In fact, some of the studios balked at the prospect of doing this. It was completely new territory for them. But again, the results speak for themselves. The Japanese studio that animated this episode, Spectrum Animation, really went above and beyond in their work here. In order to make the animation smoother, they included 2 extra frames per second without asking for extra money. This is one of the reasons why the studio eventually went bankrupt. Their work was fantastic, but their budgeting was not so hot. It's not like they could take this beautiful shot of Batman and Man-Bat flying around the police blimp to cover their bills, sadly. Speaking of the Man-Bat, one of the smartest decisions the team made is in its choice of antagonist. With the best will in the world, Man-Bat isn't one of Batman's A-list villains. At this point, he had never appeared outside of the comic books. But he is the perfect foe for this first episode because he's a dark-in version of Batman. I made a video a while back about Kirk Langstrom the Man-Bat and how he was addicted to becoming the Man-Bat. Once again, I've linked to the video in the info button and this video's description. In the comic books, Langstrom dabbled in mutagenic serums to try to cure deafness. He had noble intentions that led to his unfortunate transformation. But BTAS's Langstrom turns himself into the Man-Bat for the thrill of it. Dr. March had developed the formula out of a crackpot theory that human-bat hybrids were the only way to survive an upcoming nuclear apocalypse. But his work was mostly theoretical. Langstrom decided to test March's formula on himself, losing himself in the process like so many addicts do. And that's Langstrom's hook right there. He's a drug addict committing crimes to chase his high. And that's why Francine and Dr. March lie to Bruce Wayne. They hear his recording of the Man-Bat and they know who it is. They want to protect Kirk, even though they know what he's doing is monstrous and wrong. Just look at Francine's reaction when she bursts in on Man-Bat attacking Batman. She knew what Kirk was up to, hence why she recognizes him, but seeing him in his monstrous state moments away from killing Batman horrifies her, and Man-Bat feels shame and flies away. And there's a neat comparison to Batman, where Batman is a man who took the symbol of a bat and used it to impose order. Langstrom became the thing itself and it destroyed him. It's a subtle but effective thematic touch that gives the episode more weight than a simple monster of the week story. The choice of the Man-Bat also epitomizes Batman the Animated Series' ethos of using lesser-known villains and reinventing them in compelling ways. This was a very deliberate choice and paved the way for more characters that, at the time, were obscure, like Two-Face, Ra's al Ghul and Killer Croc, and made them household names. The willingness to take obscure characters and elevate them into serious threats would become a defining strength of the show, proving that Batman's rogues gallery had far more depth than just the Joker, Catwoman, the Riddler and the Penguin. Another thing that sets this show apart is Batman's morality. I've already mentioned the beautiful aerial fight between Batman and Man-Bat, But at its conclusion, when Man-Bat brains himself by flying headfirst into a wall, Batman saves Man-Bat from being taken in by the police. If this were any other show, the hero would likely leave the villain behind for the police to deal with, and Langstrom would have been sent to prison, even if they weren't able to undo his transformation. But Batman grabs the unconscious Langstrom and takes him to the Batcave where he works on an antidote. Batman didn't have to help Langstrom. He was a criminal. He stole chemicals, unintentionally incriminating Batman, and assaulted a security guard. But Batman sees the shades of grey. Langstrom is an addict who needs help, not incarceration. The episode ends with Batman returning Langstrom to his wife, keeping his secret rather than exposing him. It's a small but powerful moment showing Batman's compassion even for those who become monsters. He may be Gotham's protector, but he's not without empathy. And that was a defining trait of his version of Batman. On Leather Wings isn't just a great pilot, it's one of the best episodes of the entire series. Not the absolute best, because that's Two-Face Part 1. It's a mission statement, a showcase for everything that made Batman the Animated Series a masterpiece. It has horror, a compelling mystery, there's humour, and a very clear statement on how painful love can be. And most importantly, it doesn't talk down to the audience. It's not trying to sell you toys. Although I totally had my parents buy them for me, let me tell you. It's a work of art. The atmosphere, the writing, the performances, the animation, and oh my god, the music! The music! Shirley Walker's score for this series is fantastic! I wish I possessed the critical language to actually express how much I love the music she and her team created for this show, and On Leather Wings is just phenomenal, especially when comparing it to the plinky-plonky canned cartoon music of the time. But I digress. My point is that it's all here, fully formed right from the start. Few shows come out of the gate this strong, but On Leather Wings proved that this wasn't just another throwaway cartoon. It was something special. And it still is over 30 years later. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time, I'll be back on Monday to revisit my Beware the Batman villain poll to talk about the villain that came in third place, the Demon's Head, Ra's al Ghul, and the overarching threat he presented to Gotham in that show. And next Friday, I'm going to be talking about one of the very few villains to be undeniably killed in Superman the Animated Series. We're going to be talking about the head of Intergang, Bruno Mannheim, and how his ambition led to his demise. Hope to see you then.